There's a tradition during Sfirat HaOmer, during this period of counting of the Omer, of learning a special tractate of Mishnah, and that tractate is Pirkei Avot, Mishnah Avot. It kind of makes sense. There are 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot. There are 6 Shabbatot between Pesach and Shavuot. Does anybody know what day today is of the Omer? Today is day 20 of the Omer. So if you didn't get a chance to count it last night, you can do it. You can do it now. And also, this Shabbat is the second of those 6 Shabbatot. And so I thought what we would do is take a look at something from the second parak of Mishnah Avot, which is the chapter that, by tradition, we learn on this Shabbat. But before we get there, a brief story. In 1492, there was a king named Ferdinand. You may have heard of him. He was a king in Europe, and he had a measurable impact on the Jewish people of his kingdom. Now, I'm talking, of course, about King Ferdinand I of Naples, who brought peace and prosperity during the Italian Renaissance. There was, of course, another King Ferdinand in Europe. That is King Ferdinand II of Aragon. He was actually the cousin of the other Ferdinand in Naples, believe it or not. That Ferdinand, the one in Spain, on March 31st, 1492, along with his wife, Queen Isabella, issued the Alhambra Decree, which ordered the expulsion of 300,000 or so Jews from their kingdom. Now, King Ferdinand of Naples, who went by Ferrante, he, however, welcomed Jews, and many fled to other places in Christendom, including to Italy, during the Inquisition, where they found a much more hospitable environment among the people of Naples. So, why do I bring this up? A month and a half later, after the Alhambra Decree, on May 8th, 1492, a Jewish printer in Naples made the very first printed text of the Mishnah in history. Printed, I mean, using the same technology that was given to the world when the Gutenberg Bible was printed a few decades earlier. That happened in Naples. And a 13-page fragment of that 500-year-old text survives today. Any idea where it is? In the Library of Congress. I think it's still there. I don't know. Have they gotten their hooks into the Library of Congress yet? Is that a thing yet? No. Okay. Shh. Let's not. So they don't think of it. So yes, there's this 13-page fragment. I think Carla Hayden is still a Librarian of Congress, right? We're still good there. Yes. Aaron says yes. We like Carla Hayden here in Baltimore. And Abby Krolik works there. Amazing. So that fragment was actually lost to history for a very long time until it was discovered. Even after it was in the Library of Congress, that 13-page fragment of this Mishnah was discovered about 15 years ago by a woman named Dr. Ann Brenner. She's the Hebraic specialist at the library. It was made searchable online in 2019, where in 2021, Eric Lander, the newly appointed director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, he discovered it by doing a simple online search. He had been looking for a meaningful book on which to be sworn in to his new White House role. Now, you can watch, actually, the swearing-in ceremony on YouTube. It's pretty cool, as he stands there with Vice President Kamala Harris, and the open book is there of Tractate Avot, and he places his hand on the book and repeats his oath of office after Vice President Harris. And after his swearing in, Lander shared why that particular text had been meaningful to him. He spoke about 2 kingdoms, these 2 kingdoms of Spain and Naples, and these 2 Ferdinands, one who expelled Jews and the other who created a safe haven for for Jews, and he celebrated the scholarship of Dr. Ann Brenner, who discovered the fragments in an enormous cache of Hebrew texts donated in 1912 by the philanthropist Jacob Schiff. And this is what Lander said: "Although I choose a Jewish text because it is my tradition and deeply meaningful to me, it is also quite universal. And what part of the Mishnah do you think he chose to focus on?" It's from chapter 2. Let's take a look. Turn to page 242 in your Siddur, if you would. There are some slight different designations to the Mishnayot in terms of how the actual Mishnayot break down, but in this book, it's Mishnah 21 of chapter 2. And it's a reflection on holy labor. Hu haya omer, the who is Rabbi Tarfon, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor velo ata ben chorin libatel mimena. Rabbi Tarfon said, it was a favorite teaching of him, "It is not incumbent on you to finish the work, neither may you desist from it." Now that may sound familiar to some of us, and on this volunteer Shabbat, it seems like a good place for us to start because, yes, we have our professional staff who work hard for you, and I'm very proud of our Klei Kodesh and our full office staff, and yet we really can't do what we do. Beth Am can't do what it does without the many volunteers that we celebrated today here at our congregation. We, let me say on behalf of our staff, are very grateful for all of you. But of course, when we do this holy work, this Melechet Kodesh, none of us ever truly finishes the work. And all of us in our work demonstrate that our passion and commitment is to not say just because it's hard, just because it's lengthy, just because we know that we're never going to really complete the job of serving God and the Jewish people, we're not going to desist from it. We're not going to let the challenge of completing it deter us from giving of our time to this Kehillah Kedoshah. Now, you may know that there is, not only is this a famous passage, but there's actually a famous song that goes along with it. Raise your hand if you know the song. All right, good. So this side of the room knows the song. Everybody here plus Donna are going to sing along. If you know it, you may realize that you know it, but let's sing a little bit of it together. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor. And this is part 2. Velo ata ben chorin leibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin, velo ata ben chorin leibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin. Now, I don't know about the different girsa of libatel and lehibatel. I actually tried to do some research on this yesterday. All the versions of the Mishnah that I can find say libatel, not lehibatel. I'm not going to get into the kind of distinctions here right now. For our purposes, I'm much more interested in part 3 of the song. There's a part 3 to the song, and what is the part 3 to the song? Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash, Sheyibane. Right? If you were to open B'Kol Achad, the conservative movement bencher, you would find that version of the song, the third part of the song. And what does it say? Sheyibane Beit HaMikdash, Bimhera v'yameinu sheyibane, that the third temple should be rebuilt speedily and in our day. In other words, says the third part of the song, Rabbi Tarfon's teaching is made manifest, right? This idea that we do the work but don't complete the work is made manifest in the reestablishment of the temple in Jerusalem. But here's the problem. When Jeff Klepper and Danny Friedlander wrote this song, that wasn't the part 3. Where is the part 3 that they wrote from? Well, it kind of makes sense from the Mishnah. Right here. You don't see those words in the Mishnah here. In fact, they don't really appear in the Mishnah at all in that form so far as I know. And where does the original part 3 come from? It's actually from the previous Mishnah. So look on the page. We read, this was a favorite teaching. It's not incumbent on you to finish the task. Neither are you free to desist from it. But who's the his that we're talking about? As I said, it is the guy that we were already talking about in the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon Omer. And I'll sing it to you. This is the third part of the song. Hayom katzar vehamlacha meruba vehapoalim atzilim vehasachar harbe uva al habayit dochek uva al habayit dochek, and then it goes back. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor. Okay. So that's the third part of the song. And let's take a look at it. What does it mean? Hayom katzar, the day is short. The work is great. The workers are lazy. The reward is great, is much. And Val Habayit Dochek, the Baal Habayit is pressing them forward, pressing the laborers forward. Who are the laborers? Who is the Baal Habayit in this metaphor, or this analogy? Yeah, God is the Baal Habayit. God's the master. We are the laborers. We're supposed to be doing the work. It's hard to get motivated to do the work. Maybe we're a little lazy. But you still got to do the work, but you don't have to finish the work. That's what the Mishnah is teaching us. That's what Jeff Klepper and Danny Friedlander were trying to teach us when they wrote this pretty nifty song that I grew up singing at Olin Sang Ruby Union Institute in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, until I got into like Orthodox and conservative circles, and somehow there was this new version of the third part of the song, and I kind of wondered where it came from. Now, does anybody know? I actually don't know how the new part 3 or this alternative part 3 came to be. I was actually Facebook messaging with Jeff Klepper yesterday, trying to get an answer to this, but he didn't get me an answer before Shabbos. So I'm going to try to figure out if he knows how his song actually became kind of different in meaning. But let's go back to what I think the Mishnah is trying to do here. Because while we could have a debate about what it means to pray for the rebuilding of Jerusalem or the rebuilding of the temple, I at least am not as concerned about that. Certainly right now, it's not something that I pray for. It's not something that I'm looking to do. I've been to the Dome of the Rock. It's a lovely building, and it's been there a really long time. And yeah, like there were some problems with like what Islam did in the 7th century as it moved through the Near East and conquered, peoples and built holy sites. But like, I don't really want to adjudicate that right now, and I think Rabbinic Judaism is doing pretty well, and so like for me, I might pray for the rebuilding of Jerusalem, but I'm not literally praying for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, understanding what that actually might mean. And I don't think that's what the Mishnah is talking about at all. That's not what's going on here. What are we trying to say? I think what we're trying to say, I think what inspired Dr. Lander to use this text when he was being installed as chief of science and technology policy is that the work of, scientific discovery, the work of human beings, when it's holy work, is arduous and it's iterative and it's filled with setbacks and occasionally great discoveries, like when Eric Lander worked to map the human genome, or when Ann Brenner discovered these very old Hebrew pages while sifting through tens of thousands of others. And one other note about our context here. Because though it didn't make it into the song, the original text of the Mishnah actually doesn't seem to be talking about any od melacha either. Doesn't mean it can't be applied to that, but if you look at the text, what does it say? Im lamadata Torah harbe, notim lach sachar harbe. If you have studied much Torah, you know that there is going to be a great reward for that. It seems actually that the point of our Mishnah is about learning. That's the work that at least Rabbi Tarfon is referring to here in this Mishnah. It's about learning. And it is hard to make time for learning, isn't it? Rabbi Josh Kolb, who's been a scholar in residence here at Beth Am, he brings a parable on this Mishnah. He says it's like a king who hires workers to fill in a gigantic hole. This is Torah learning. The foolish worker takes a look at the hole and says, how can I ever finish this? And the intelligent worker says to himself, I was only hired for a day, but at least I found work. Thus, God says to the Jewish people, you are only hired for as long as I'm going to give you compensation to do what you're doing. The compensation being the reward that comes from Torah study. So do your day's labor and don't worry about the rest. Maybe tomorrow you'll get another day. Maybe in Olam Haba you'll get some additional time. But the work is in front of us. So start digging the hole, start doing the work, start building the enterprise that is Torah learning. That's why we learn Perkei Avot during the Omer, I think. Not only because the material is brilliant, but because the practice of learning is a fundament of Jewish living. We are, my friends, a learning people. Omer marks the progression from Pesach to Shavuot. What happens on Pesach? Yetziat Mitzrayim, the Exodus. What happens on Shavuos? Matan Torah, we receive Torah. Pesach is the beginning of our liberation. Shavuot is the start of our education. On this 50th anniversary, we should remember that Dr. Kaplan taught us from the earliest days that we are a learning community. Everything we do grows out of our desire to learn this ancient, robust, complicated, evolving, living tradition we call Torah. That's why we're writing a Sefer Torah this year, to celebrate our collective learning as a community. And all of the work that we do as professionals and as volunteers is about learning. It grows out of our desire to live the values captured in this oral Torah and in that written Torah together. We build upon this incredible legacy of our tradition. So my friends, on this volunteer Shabbat, during this 50th anniversary year, may the work of our hands continue to create spaces for us to come together for service, for avodah, for gimilut chasadim, for good work, and also for Torah, for limud, for holy learning. Shabbat shalom.